Hi and welcome to another gaming video, and in today's video I want to talk about the Sony PlayStation Vita. Now it is a absolutely fantastic console. This is my slim model, so it's the second version of it. The first one was a little bit chunkier, it came with an OLED screen and its own charging port. So when I was looking to get another Vita, I wanted to make sure that it was a slim because I just prefer the micro USB port. I wasn't too bothered about the fact that it's just got a normal screen, not an OLED screen. The OLED was nice, but I can honestly say I've not really noticed too much of an issue just playing on a regular screen. But the main question on this video, or the main subject for this video, is why did the PS Vita fail? It is an absolutely blinding console. It's probably what I would call the, well, pre-Switch anyway. Let's wind this back to about 2013 when the Vita was about a year old. It was getting into its stride. Nobody had even heard of the Switch yet. The PlayStation Vita is the best portable games console ever. It's and I'm saying that from a user's point of view. I'm not going into sales or anything like that because it's one of the worst selling consoles ever. But from a games point of view, I think the PS Vita is probably the best portable games experience you're going to get pre-Switch. And even into the Switch era, the Switch is a Nintendo product. It did try and break into a bit more of a mature console, but it's still very Nintendo-y. It's still Mario and Pokemon and Kirby, etc. And if you like those sort of games, that's fantastic. But if you're looking for a console that offered awesome power and sort of AAA style home games on a portable console, then the PS Vita is what you need. So we'll wind it back a little bit. You've got Nintendo. They have always been the king of portable consoles. You go back to the Game Boy, it trounced everything else. You go to the Game Boy Advance, it did pretty well, but I think it rid off of the Game Boy name quite a bit. The DS, absolutely fantastic. The same with the 3DS. It didn't do superbly well, but the fact that it was backwards compatible and it rid off of the Nintendo DS name. Nintendo are just the king, at least in terms of sales, for portable consoles. The only company to make a small dent in the whole portable market outside of Nintendo was Sony with the PSP. It did pretty well, around about 80 million, which is a fair decent amount, but it still couldn't break into it. But with Sony, they were going for this home portable console rather than a console that could play games, but they weren't the ones you'd play at home. So the PSP was pretty good. It was like a portable PS2, and it had some AAA big name titles, and for its time it was very good. And then they released the Vita. Now I for the life of me cannot understand why it didn't do as well as it did. In fact, I think it sold something like 14 million. It really is a poor selling console. There are a number of reasons, and I do know why some of those reasons are. First of all, mobile gaming had taken off by that point. Everyone was sort of getting into iPhones and Androids, and it was pushing sales of dedicated handheld games out. So they kind of released it at the wrong time. Sony being Sony, they always make these glaring mistakes. So I don't think I've got one in this. I think I take it out. Oh no, I do. Then you get these little proprietary memory cards. Now Sony can't just think, well, I'll just put everything on a micro SD. No, we've got to bring out these expensive cards. These are, well, this one is an 18 gig. No, it isn't. This one is an 8 gig. I think the biggest you can get is 64 gig. And at the time, buying a 64 gig memory card was probably more expensive than buying the Vita itself. So the price of external storage for a Vita was absolutely insane. With the original Vita, they had this weird charging port. Luckily, they did change it back to a micro USB on the Slim, so you can charge this up with pretty much anything. But if you have an original, then you've got to find a Sony PS Vita charger. This is a small niggle. Now, Sony always seem to just drop something, miss something off of a console. So with the PSP, it was absolutely fantastic, but it only had one stick. I think it was this side. So you only had one stick, which, when considering it was sort of trying to be a portable PlayStation, it had PS2 quality graphics. It was trying to bring in some of those big name games. The lack of a second stick really did hinder it. And I think had they had already put two sticks on the PSP, I think that probably would have wiped the floor with Nintendo. But luckily, when they brought out the Vita, they'd listened and it's got two sticks. But it's got no triggers. So you've got your two shoulder buttons, but there's no trigger buttons. Now, this is almost like a portable PS3, and they were bringing games across, like there were Killzone games, there was Borderlands, and Borderlands 2, sorry, there wasn't Borderlands, there was Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2, which was a PS3 game, was brought across to the PS Vita. Fantastic game to play. It really did show off that this was trying to push itself as a mini PS3, but there's no shoulder button, no trigger buttons, so you had to rely on this weird touchpad as a sort of a makeshift triggers, and it didn't work very well. Sony really should have just brought out a bit like the Switch, where you've got your two buttons up here and then some little trigger buttons down here. So that is a big glaring error, I think, on Sony's part. If they really wanted to push this as a portable PlayStation, and bearing in mind that you can connect this to a PS4 as remote play, you can play your PS4 games through this, so you can see your PS4 games on this screen and use the it made it like a controller with a screen in it. But that's great. But PS4 has triggers, and playing PS4 games with this as your triggers is not great. You could buy some additional cases which had some trigger buttons which would sort of push into this, and it really was just the worst thing to do. It is a huge glaring mistake from Sony. And then you've got the price point, another big problem with it. Like I said, we were already getting into mobile gaming. The 3DS wasn't doing as well as the DS, and the Vita came out very expensive. All these little niggles like expensive memory cards, and the games were horrendously expensive, and it just snowballed into nothing. All of these problems and all of these little glaring mistakes that Sony made really led to the demise of the Vita. Now, I would say it probably had about a year or two of success before people started realising that it's too expensive and the games were expensive, and then developers started sort of dropping off big name games. I mean, there was no official GTA game for the Vita. That really probably did hurt it, because 2012-13, GTA was very big then. It's sort of when GTA 5 would sort of come out, and we had no Grand Theft Auto on the Vita, a console that was easily powerful enough. As you've seen in some of my other videos, there's some homebrew titles where they've ported things like GTA San Andreas to the Vita. It plays absolutely fantastically. Sony didn't get behind the Vita very much, and then developers didn't. There isn't a huge selection of games for the Vita. Don't get me wrong, the games that were released are fantastic. You've got your Borderlands 2, your Killzone, Little Big Planet, Tearaway, Gravity Rush, Need for Speed, Most Wanted. I think there was a Ridge Racer. some real... Oh, and an Uncharted, which is probably the flagship game for this system. There really was some big name titles, but there wasn't a huge selection. If you take something like the DS and the 3DS range, there were thousands of games, all for that system. It really just kept the momentum of the DS range going. But the Vita, which wasn't backward compatible with the PSP, because obviously the PSP used the UMD discs, and the Vita has its own little game carts. So if you had any PSP games, you couldn't play them on here. Some of the games were available on the store as a download, so you could download some of the PSP games onto the Vita and play them that way. But nobody wants to re-buy a game they've already bought just so they can play it on their new system. There's a huge list of things there as to why the Vita failed, and I'm just going to surmise it. So, lack of triggers, high price for the console, high price for the accessories, high price for the games, and a lack of games, really. I just think it was very slow paced, and by the time we did get some like a good momentum of games, the Vita was already dead in the water, and people were just picking up their phones and playing Angry Birds and Candy Crush and that sort of thing, and it just hurt. It hurt the whole portable games market altogether. It's only really kind of been revived by the Switch, but the Switch isn't exactly a portable console. It's a hybrid, so it's their home console, but you can play it on the go as well. And there you go. That is my summary as to why the PS Vita, which is, in my opinion, one of the greatest handheld consoles and one of the greatest consoles of all time, flopped. And it is a shame, because I absolutely love this. If you can run custom firmware on it, it opens it up even more. There are hundreds and hundreds of sort of PC games or other console games that are ported across to it via the modding teams and the community for custom firmware, etc. And this is just an absolutely phenomenal console that should have done better, and had it have done better, it would just have been fantastic. Had this been given a good start and sold well, I think it would have been amazing to see what games were actually brought across to it. So let me know what you think of the PlayStation Vita. I think it is absolutely fantastic. I've just realised that I've shot this whole video without even turning it on. So I'm just going to quickly turn it on. Or not, because it might have run out of battery. Oh, look, it's dead. So I'm not going to be turning it on. But it is a fantastic console. It's a bit of a fingerprint magnet, I will give it that. Touch screen, touch pad on the back, twin sticks, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, you name it, it's got it. But it just didn't take off. Too expensive, released at the wrong time, and not enough games. But there you go. Let me know what you think of the PlayStation Vita. Do you love it? Do you have one? Do you want one? Or do you follow most popular opinion that it is just an awful console that just didn't do what it should do? Let me know. Link, like, subscribe, enjoy.